Hello, and welcome to another review video. Here, I'll be looking at the Digimon Collab. This rerun introduces a second REM with 25 new units, while the old REM still has the 23 previously introduced units, and some of those have gotten buffs or new evos. But apart from a very select few, there is very little reason to roll the first REM. And like always, the highlight units of the collab can only be obtained from the newest REM. So if you'll be rolling at all, your main focus should be on the newest REM. Before looking into the REM units, let me first take a quick look at the other Digimon units. And if you enjoyed the video, please remember to like and subscribe. First up, the Descended Bosses. If you will be playing any of these units below, make sure to grab and max scale these two farmable units to unlock the REM unit Sync Awakenings. Next, you should try to get these equips and unit that are all exchangeable for Rainbow Event Medals. The D-Terminal and Digivice are also needed to unlock the REM unit Sync Awakenings, so prioritize these two if again you have any plans to use those units. Tenma and Gabumon look very unimpressive, and this exchange requires 20 Rainbow tokens. Getting that amount is not difficult, but very time consuming, and since this unit is not needed for anything like a Sync Awakening, I wouldn't really stress about getting them, though you never know if this will ever be useful for something like a ranking dungeon. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but since free is free, try to get everything just in case. Imperialdramon Paladin mode is the MP unit of the event, so if you want to enhance the Digimon badge to squeeze out a few more stats, make sure to buy this unit for 1 million MP. This is also a unit that you could purchase for $30, but buying MP units with money always feels like a scam, so I wouldn't recommend it. The base mainly sees use alongside Omnimon, where 2 copies of this and 3 Omnimons will give you a board and a 1.5 HP buff every turn. This team also has 100% Pierce and Attribute and Damage Absorption Void uptime, so even though the team is not very flexible, it does cover most mechanics. Apart from bringing more damage and Parpig Awakenings to the table, in comparison to Joe, who used to accompany Omnimon, this unit will also give you an activatable board in 5x4 that also ensures a heal combo. Therefore, board shrinks are not that big of an issue for this new Omnimon team. A common complaint is that this team doesn't have a lot of move time, so if you're not that comfortable matching multiple TPAs with the basic second move time, make sure to use some equips that give you Finger Awakening. Those will also be very handy if you decide to run an Imperialdramon Paladin mode as leader and want to work with his 7x6 board. Running this unit will also grant a recovery boost to better cope with super altitude dungeons. However, even then, the team will probably have a hard time when it comes to healing, especially once thorns come into the picture, as you will have to make up for the fact that this unit doesn't give you any bonus combos. So reaching 10C and matching enough TPAs might mean incurring a lot of thorn damage. This unit's equip has solid awakenings for damage dealers in parts farming teams, and it also comes with the first ever 100% parts gravity. I haven't seen that many non-mean teams that actually use this, but this uniqueness alone might be worth the 1 million MP. And again, for those of you that want to use this unit alongside Omnimon, you might want to get at least 2 Imperialdramon Paladin modes. However, if you have any other meta leaders like Doma or Rosetta, I will probably stick with those, as this new Omnimon team is honestly not that impressive and will be very expensive to assemble if you don't already have 2 or 3 Omnimon. MP is precious, so before spending it, make sure to check out the returning and upcoming MP units before pulling the trigger on Imperialdramon Paladin mode. Again, when it comes to which REM to focus on, the newest one has the most value if you care for meta teams. The first REM does have some useful units, though that mainly only goes for the units that receive new evos. Yamato is the REM1 Overview unit, and his all forms are largely unimpressive. The Beast and the Evo could make up a team, though it will definitely struggle in newest dungeons since their effective HP is a little bit on the lower side. His new Evo can make up a 3-unit swipe system with a no Skyfell combo leader skill. However, if you have Kikuro and maybe even an Ordeal Odin setup, a Yamato system won't be all that better or faster. Technically, Kikuro has the same number of active skill animations as Yamato's newest Evo if you have an attacker attack buff, but at least with that Kaiju number 8 unit, you can choose one or to activate those other secondary effects and swipe even faster. Even if you're missing those other swipe leaders, I would really skip on Yamato since trying to get a system will mean rolling on the first REM. You could get one Yamato via bundle, but you would still need to get at least one other copy to complete the system if you have a helper. And since Yamato's equip is not remarkable, I would not recommend chasing Yamato or spending any money on his bundle. Taichi is the REM1 BGM unit, and he is a bit more useful than Yamato since the base can still be used for XP farming in some late-ish endgame dungeons like Old U and Rush, especially because his leader skill now gives you a 1.5 XP boost up from 1.2. The bad part is that Taichi's Origin and Cap Breaking active skill is still on a fortune cooldown, and thus his teams are not that flexible. You will need to run multiple Omnimons or Taichis to have a decent enough team. His Evo gives you a special roulette for 2 turns, but since this is on a 3-turn cooldown, you would still need another orb generator in a team if you decide to run 2 of the base Taichis as leaders. His new reincarnated Evo can help close the orb gen loop, but do note that the board that this new form gives you includes bomb orbs. The active skill will generate at least 3 bomb orbs, so you don't have to worry about stray bombs, but this will mean that you will have to be especially mindful of matching them, as not doing that could cost you a run by undoing unnecessary combos to activate your leader skills. This new Taichi Evo also gives a looping Fire Skyfall buff that could enable some teams, but I don't think that any team that cares for that buff will be a big fan of this unit's board change active skill. The Skullgreymon Evo could be used for swipe farming, but considering you need 4 copies of this BGM unit to make a system, I really would not recommend chasing this unit for that purpose, especially so because this system is not that flexible or all that strong. Taichi's equip is still very solid for BDP units, as this is the only one with a 7C and a BDP plus Awakening, though to be honest, I haven't seen this being in high demand. Overall, just like with Yamato, if you have this unit from previous runs, then good for you. You might be able to make use of them, but for those that never rolled one, I would say that this is a unit that is not worth chasing or buying this time around. Sora is a mid-priority unit that is somewhat common in Imperialdramon teams, at least that was the case in JP before Christmas Hathor showed up. Base Sora serves as a piercer that also gives a 35% damage reduction shield for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. And even though these effects are not looping, the duration is fine alongside Yole in newer dungeons, as that other unit will give you more pierce uptime, and when it comes to the non-looping shield effect, newer dungeons don't really call for those anymore. The reason why Sora was often chosen for Imperialdramon teams, apart from her active skill, was the fact that she's a damage dealer with the TPA Awakening. That Awakening was key to dealing with unmatchable debuffs via the unmatchable latents in those teams. Though obviously, without an attribute changing equip, she won't be able to deal with fire unmatchable debuffs. If you're going for an Imperialdramon team and have Christmas Hathor or even Christmas Odin and Freyk, then there's almost no reason why you should be chasing this mid-priority unit. Maybe hope for a free Sora if you don't have any of those other Christmas units. Diaboromon and his equip are still largely unimpressive even after their buffs. Dark has plenty of orb gen units, and this one doesn't offer much. Plus, the equip is still pretty niche. However, this unit might be worth the trade if you use Rosetta. Their new Evo, Armageddemon, is a great Omni Piercer for teams that consistently get 8 or more Dark Orbs on the board. Rosetta does that consistently, and this unit will be of tremendous help to deal with some dungeons where damage void shields are a very common mechanic. Also make note of these new Evos Moon Awakenings. These should help in the upcoming Moon Title dungeon, especially for Rosetta teams who struggles to meet HP thresholds before her Barrel Awakenings come online. This unit is exchangeable, but only for REM1 units. So unless you main Rosetta and have no other viable team, do think it over whether this unit is worth rolling the REM1 machine. Worst case scenario, Armageddemon will set you back about 70 magic stones. Omnimon is the batch unit of the collab, but unlike Diaboromon, this unit does take some REM2 units as fodder in addition to most REM1 units. As I mentioned before, you can pair this unit with 2 of the MP unit to cover most game mechanics. Omnimon was buffed with higher cap breaks that now allow his teams to have similar enough damage outputs to other meta teams, though unfortunately, the output varies from turn to turn as Omnimon's first and second stage cap breaks are noticeably different. So Omnimon teams do lack consistency and are not really up to par to other leaders like Doma and Rosetta. So this time around, I wouldn't really recommend getting multiple Omnimons. If you have no other meta leaders, I would rather keep saving up for future events, as an Omnimon team will not fare all that well, especially in the near future. That's not to say that these teams won't be able to tackle the latest endgame title, for example, but the team's lack of flexibility and inconsistent damage output will make your runs a little bit more painful, especially so if you care about farming parts, as this unit doesn't have a parts boosting leader skill, so along with the MP unit, it shouldn't be all that difficult to stack enough part break awakenings to guarantee that parts drop. Omnimon's Grace or Equip can help you out there, though this might not be the best option in other teams as this equip lacks a haste active skill and TPA awakenings might be completely useless. The new Garuru Cannon equip is pretty amazing for water units. This one is basically a better version of Path Island Claudius and is great for some Doma subs like Laufey and the Giyu duo. The new SDR awakening means that your Laufey can resist up to 4 skill delays while still being able to help recover assist. Definitely get one Omnimon for the badge if you manage to complete an Imperialdramon team. And maybe if you didn't manage to get Imperialdramon, it might not be the worst idea to exchange for one Omnimon to further improve your Doma team with the Garuru Cannon equip. Again, getting more than one copy of this unit isn't the wisest investment this time around, unless you really want to play with this unit and are also willing to buy 2 of the MP unit. Now onto the REM2 units. Unfortunately, apart from those that make up the Imperialdramon team, most of these have very niche uses, and therefore you might not want to spend that many stones in this collab. It really doesn't help that most of the exchanges that take collab units as fodder are also in the same niche category. So if you're unlucky, you might end up without an Imperialdramon team and maybe have multiple units who don't really have much value past their first copy. These 3 are a prime example as their bases are largely unimpressive and I think that their equips probably only warrant one copy. Shogun Gekomon's equip gives you a fixed board which might come in handy for some ranking dungeons. I do doubt that this will be all that useful, but you never really know with ranking dungeons, so if you care for that content, you might even want to keep every single copy of this unit that you roll. The other 2 units have equips with Tensei Awakenings, which might be pretty great for those of you that are lacking Monster Box depth. Yes, the active skills might not be the best due to the lack of effective skill boost, but in the case of Diamond's equip, 6 turns of light attribute damage void and a cap break effect for devil types could be very handy for cheesing or farming certain dungeons. These 2 units could come in handy for dark swipe teams, but since they lack damage, you will be pretty limited on where to use them. Skull Satamon could be used alongside the new Skull Greymon, though as I mentioned in that other unit section, that Evo is a pretty lackluster swipe unit. On the other hand, Yukio has a somewhat interesting active skill that is able to change your whole team to dark attribute and it also gives you a full dark board. But due to the 8-turn cooldown, you won't be able to easily cycle this unit. At the very least, these 2 units do have equips that give you some effective skill boost. And in the case of Yukio's, its mix of awakenings and its long-lasting cap break could be very handy, especially against light enemies. Arukenimon is a unit that could come in useful for certain rankings as her transforming active skill and her equip both give fixed boards. Though the bad part about the base is that her post-transformation active skill might not be that useful for the rest of the ranking dungeon. On transformation, Omnimon inflicts a 25% true gravity attack, so with 4 of him in a team, you could kill the first floor if your team has enough skill boost. However, there really isn't that many dungeons where you can get away with bringing 4 of this unit. Post-transformation, Momimon's active skill doesn't offer much value as a looping 1.5 HP buff on a 6-turn cooldown is not that impressive nowadays. This unit's equip does look interesting due to its cap break and attribute changing effect granted to your left side ally. I'm not entirely sure where this could be all that useful, especially since the effects only last for 5 turns, but this effect means that you won't have to bother using an attribute changing equip on your left side ally. Submarimon is a looping cap breaker for water teams that can bring some decent utility. This unit also gives you a water and heal Skyfall buff, though at this point in time, I don't think that there's any team that cares for this. Doma teams do come to mind, but those teams don't have a need for a water cap breaker and also have access to quicker Skyfall rebuffers. This unit's equip grants a good amount of bulk and could turn a 1-turn cooldown unit into a looping shield and water Skyfall rebuffer. A few other equips are able to do something similar apart from the water Skyfall, and since none of them ever really caught on, I am very skeptical that this will be any different. And since equips with 3 team HP awakenings are not all that rare nowadays, I doubt that this unit and its equip will be in high demand. Shurimon is an interesting wood cross unit that is able to change adjacent allies' attribute to wood, and since this is a looping effect, you could run non-wood units in a full wood cross team as long as you keep cycling this unit. We don't exactly have a wood cross leader at the moment, so just like with the previous unit, I think that the demand for Shurimon is not high at all. However, this unit can still come in handy when it comes to dealing with unmatchable debuffs and clearing sticky blind skyfalls. These two units could work in certain Kikoro builds, though Genai won't really provide that much with his active skill. This unit is only a looping cap breaker with at least 3 other 7-2 cooldown haste units in a team. So generally speaking, Kikoro teams will be better off by sticking with Isao, especially because that Kaiju number 8 unit also gives you higher cap break than Genai. Genai's equip is an option to boost damage, though in Kikoro teams, the 7C Awakening is pretty much that. REM is the first unit with the 50% parts gravity. It's not the highest since the Digimon MP unit's equip exists, but at least REM could actually be used more than once per dungeon. This unit's attack buff will also enable you to fully activate Kikoro's conditional active skill. Sure, Isao gives you both a cap break and attack buff, but there could be times where you would like to separate these two effects to farm a bit faster with Kikoro. REM's equip is the only one with the Light Sub attribute and 4 L awakenings, so this could be great on light L units like the Kikoro Duo. The equip's active skill gives you a fixed board, so this could be useful for future ranking dungeons. This is somewhat similar to Alicia's equip, but without the haste effect, this Digimon equip probably won't show up all that much in ranking builds, especially so because this equip has a cooldown that makes it very hard to reuse. Things might have been a little bit different if this equip's cooldown were a lot shorter. These two units are exchangeable for GFEs, so you could obtain them without rolling in this collab. Unfortunately, these aren't all that great and are not really worth the exchange. Ken Amormon is a decent damage dealer with 2 power break awakenings, but unfortunately for this unit, wood teams are often lacking and this unit doesn't really do much for this attribute. This unit has a decent later skill that is only missing follow-up attack damage, and unfortunately, there isn't a strong pairing for Ken. I think the intention is to pair 2 of this unit and then use the nail orbs generated from the post-transformation active skill to deal with result, but unless you have 3 Kens in a team, if you're not careful, you may have one turn without any Fua. I feel like this unit would have been great if he also generated the needed orbs to activate his own leader skill, but since that's not the case, and because this unit's equip is also not that impressive, I feel like this is a unit that you could completely skip. Sylphimon would fit in a Fire Haze team, but since at the moment no such team exists that would want an absorption voider like this one, I also don't see much reason why you should exchange for this unit. Though maybe the equip can come in handy for the various Fire Machine units with resonance that have been released so far, or might be in the near future with My Hero Academia. I do think that 5 GFEs is a steep price for this equip, but I would definitely look into it if you have the means and some of those units. Imperialdramon is a damage dealer for tricolor teams. Obviously, he's meant to work with Imperialdramon teams, but these don't really have space for this type of unit. Imperialdramon's active skill doesn't bring much to the table, as those teams can power through most attack debuffs and can mostly ignore 4 trinks. The 50% damage reduction shield is also not that impactful if you have Christmas Hathor's looping 40% shield. Imperialdramon's looping Fire Skyfall will also not be that useful to the team, and those other teams who would want that Skyfall buff will most likely not be able to take full advantage of this unit's damage awakenings. However, those who care for ranking dungeons might want to grab this unit for its equip as it gives 3 different Taco and TPA awakenings. Since you can get this unit for 5 GFEs, you don't even have to touch the REM. Ken and Chimeramon sport the new Expert Multi-Match Awakening, so if you're confident in your abilities to reliably match Rainbow in 5 seconds or less, this is a mid-priority unit that you might want to chase. Though that new Awakening is something that you could ignore and go with some of the other choices, like this unit's Moon Awakening, which will be very helpful in Moon dungeons like the newest title challenge. Chimeramon can be a decent leader, though you will either need to pair with a unit that deals follow-up attack damage or actually make use of the new Awakening, which gives a 5% follow-up attack. Teams that focus on the new Expert Multi-Match Awakening don't have a lot to work with, so if you're lacking units like Christmas Florentia, you probably won't be able to make a strong team that capitalizes on this playstyle. Maybe this unit will be great in the future as Gung-Ho keeps releasing more and more units with Expert Multi-Match. However, so far all of the units that have been recently released have been underwhelming and they don't all exactly synergize very well. Still, if you like rainbow teams, make sure to keep all of your Chimeramons, as this Omnipiercer could work really well with some future leader. These two units are exchangeable and take REM2 units as fodder. Magnamon is the first unit that is able to break 2 shields at once, and even though this effect is unique at the moment, I find it hard to justify a team slot for this unit as the rest of the effects on his active skill are somewhat underwhelming. Any viable team should already have cap breakers, and even though 18 billion for the whole team is significant, I feel like this damage boost will not drastically change things in in-game dungeons. The board given by Magnamon is also something that your team cannot rely on due to the 6-turn cooldown, so at best, I think that this unit will only be good for some ranking dungeons. In fact, this unit was great for the Christmas ranking dungeon that ended a few weeks ago, but maybe in the future, we'll see other rankings where the team-wide cap break and double shield break will both come in clutch. Magnamon's equip adds a lot of bulk and gives an SDR awakening. So far, there are only 2 equips that are similar to this. Overall, since both Magnamon forms can be of use, I would say that getting at least 1 copy is not a bad idea. BlackWarGreymon is a more than looping cap breaker for dark units that brings a ton of bulk in moon dungeons. This unit is commonly used in some moon dungeon farming builds like this one with Frets. In those teams, this unit basically replaces Cassian as your cap breaker that also allows you to void absorptions. Unfortunately, most of the builds that I've seen usually make use of Geto from the JJK rerun that NA never got. Therefore, our server will not have the easiest time finding a replacement for those farming builds. I linked to a playlist in the description down below where you can see BlackWarGreymon in action. Check them out as these teams might make you want to get 1 or 2 BlackWarGreymons to help you tackle the moon title dungeon. And even if you don't have any interest in these teams, you might want to grab a copy for this unit's equip, which happens to sport a very unique set of awakening. Iori is a mid-priority unit that sometimes is used in light teams, but could also work in Mina teams if you go out of your way to match with TPAs to take advantage of this unit's damage awakening. Though if you use him with Mina, you will definitely want to change his sub-attribute to fire or wood. However, due to resonance, you will have to stick to wood as we don't have any equips at the moment that can activate that awakening's requirements and give a fire sub-attribute. The base in a Mina team will not provide much value as this unit's active skill will only bring a board change every 6 turns. He does loop his own damage cap break and also provide a shield break effect, though I would argue that all of this doesn't provide enough value to guarantee a spot in a team, especially Mina's. The Evo does bring a bit more to the table, as on top of increasing the damage output for the team, if properly placed, Iori will also grant you a looping shield. You also get access to a part's gravity, which is pretty handy in mass attack teams like Mina's to ensure part destruction before killing the main body. This unit and the rest of the wood and light TPA units from this collab failed to make much of an impact in the meta, which is why I have only been mentioning Iori in the context of Mina teams. So I don't think getting this unit will provide all that much value unless you really want to play this team or see any value out of Iori's equips. The first one will boost a unit's damage and also give a decent amount of bulk, especially against fire enemies. Plus the active skill is somewhat easy to overcharge and grant 6 turns of possibly useful effects. This could come in handy in some dungeons where you might only expect 1 or a few enemies with damage absorption somewhat close together. So with this equip, you might be able to save a team slot. The second equip is a bit more niche due to the wood sub-attribute awakening and the not always useful active skill, as delays can be ineffective against some enemies. Still, this equip has decent awakenings and the 5 turns of cap break and gravity effects could be useful somewhere. Willis serves as the orb generator in this wood and light TPA team, though as you'll notice, they have a very unreliable way of generating orbs. Since this unit does not give you a set amount, I think it's highly unlikely that you won't have enough orbs to match a single TPA to activate this unit's leader skill, but this can always pose a problem whenever an enemy messes with your board. A much larger issue is the fact that this unit does not generate any heals. Therefore, you will have to find a source of healing either by running a roulette, an auto healer, or a reliable orb generator. So if you make a system with this unit, apart from having unreliable orb gen, you will have 100% uptime on a damage absorption voiding effect. But this basically means that 2 of this unit in a team will almost always be a requirement to deal with enemies with damage absorption shields, as only 1 turn of this effect might not be enough. As a damage stick, this is a fine unit, but in practice, there really isn't a team out there other than this one that would highly benefit from this unit's active skill. The Evo could have been a fine candidate to help with the origin issue if only the active skill on this unit would loop. But since this roulette is only for one turn, this Evo will mainly just serve as a damage stick that is able to help tank large hits. The equip does come with a lot of light OEs, and most notably also gives a long-lasting cap break to light units. This 10-turn lasting effect could be great for some short dungeons, though I really doubt that this will be all that useful since nowadays we have a lot of units that either give a looping cap break effect to your whole team or to themselves. Shakkoumon is probably a better fit in the team over the last unit's Evo, as this unit's roulette almost loops. You will still have a turn of downtime, so there's always the risk of not being able to activate certain later skills, especially if you're relying on a unit like Willis. The special roulette from this active skill makes it much easier to fix boards, plus with the time buff, you will have an easy time fishing out enough orbs to both deal damage and maybe even recover assess with this unit's L awakenings. One thing to watch out for is that this unit is bindable. This usually doesn't matter much, but is another issue that this light team might really need to fix depending on the dungeon. Shakoumon's own equip could solve the bindable issue, but since limited awakenings do not stack, this unit with their own equip will probably not deal that much damage. The equip could be pretty handy on other units, like Christmas Millie, who also happens to be missing an SBR awakening. I don't think that this equip is in high demand at the moment, and that also goes double for the base. However, I do like the mix of awakenings on the former, so if you don't manage to roll this unit and can afford the trade, maybe look into getting a Shakkoumon just for this equip. TK is a light combo leader, but unfortunately, I don't think that he does all that much as a unit. TK is a damage stick that provides you with a light skyfall buff, and at the moment, this type of buff is not in high demand. Apart from the light skyfall buff, TK also gives you a recovery and move time buff, which won't be all that helpful in the only team where you might actually use this unit, as Hikari already brings solutions to any recovery and move time debuffs. In addition, Hikari will also be constantly overriding TK's cap break, so basically, TK will only serve as a light skyfall rebuffer. TK's equips are also somewhat lackluster, but could work on light units for this TK and Hikari team. Though if you're not going for this team, I feel like this is a unit that you could definitely do without. Hikari has a conditional active skill, and currently TK is the best unit to help meet this condition. You'll notice that Hikari's leader skill gives you fixed move time, and that her active skill also gives you a recovery buff. And these are the reasons why TK is basically just a glorified light scaffold rebuffer. The only reason why you're using TK as a leader is the fact that his leader skill comes with Fua and a large recovery buff. Two Hikaris in a team only give you an activatable board half the time, so to have consistent orb gen, you'll have to bring someone on a 2-turn cooldown like the Zenitsu duo. Along with TK and your other orb gen unit, the team will only have 2 slots to cover other common mechanics. The team will definitely need a cleric, and that will only leave 1 other slot to deal with absorptions and damage void shields. An Omni Piercer, like the Kiddies duo, can complete your team, but if you lack any of the non-Digimon units shown on screen, you won't be able to make a halfway decent light combo team without cutting some corners. One glaring issue with this team is the fact that you don't have access to an HP rebuffer, so if the Zenitsu duo's first stage active skill gets voided, your team might not have enough bulk to survive in the latest in-game dungeons. If you have any other modern leader, I see very little value in chasing both Hikari and TK. Daisuke is the REM2 Orb Skin unit. He is commonly used in the Imperialdramon teams as a half cleric, as his post-transformation active skill can only deal with awoken binds and not unmatchable debuffs. A lot of early Digimon teams felt a bit awkward due to them using a TPA unit or equip to then putting an unmatchable recovery latent on said unit to deal with that other debuff. However, since we in NA got access to Christmas Hathor before Digimon, we now have a sub that can serve as a full cleric. Therefore, Base Daisuke's main role is now as an HP buffer to deal with large hits. This unit also brings a lot of utility to the table, as he can help recover assist and deal with sticky blind skyfall. Unfortunately, the Evo doesn't seem that useful, as the active skill only seems very good for a very specific ranking dungeon. A button with a long cooldown means you most likely won't be able to reuse it, and 1 billion damage might not be enough to deal with enemies outside of ranking dungeons. Though since Evo Daisuke gives you an Omni Pierce effect before dealing damage, we might see a future ranking dungeon where this unit is better than other larger buttons like Bad Allen Ganisha. Both of Daisuke's equips are great, especially since they can activate resonance on all of the fire units that have been released as of late. The second equip has a lot of value in dungeons with a lot of dark enemies, so long as you don't mind the fire sub-attribute. Since this unit is amazing in Imperialdramon teams, the bundle might be worth a look if this is a unit you're missing. Miyako is a mid-priority unit that plays an essential role in basically every meta fire and wood team, though the unfortunate part is that she can only be obtained from the REM. The base form is maybe the least used, but if you have nothing better for your Digimon teams, this is a decent option to help tank large heads. Due to her Fire Raw Awakening, she will synergize very well in Mina teams. However, on transformation, Miyako will not provide you with any effective skill boost and will give you a very useless, long-lasting attribute absorption voiding effect, and Mina herself already covers that. Miyako's Evo is much more widely used in fire and wood teams, as she is an amazing damage dealer that can tackle common enemy shields on decent uptime. This form can help stack skill boosts as her Heart L Awakening lets you use the skill boost ++ Latent, and thankfully, since she comes with 2 SDR Awakenings, this form will be able to resist up to 6 skill delays even with that 6 slot Latent. And since both this form and the previous one come with Part Gravity attacks, your mass attack teams will have an easier time ensuring that you break parts before killing the main body. Just like with Daisuke, Miyako's equips are very valuable for all of the recently released Fire Machine types, so I would make sure to keep every copy that you manage to roll. And finally, Imperialdramon. This is the REM2 BGM unit, and this unfortunately makes up a 3-unit system that happens to be one of the best leaders in the game, at least for the foreseeable future. Think back to when Muichiro was released. Getting an Imperialdramon team will be just as difficult and expensive. Actually, probably more so, since both Daisuke and Miyako can be a pain to roll from the REM. That comparison alone will probably scare a lot of you, since chasing 2 or more copies of a BGM unit without buying any bundles will require a lot of magic stones and a lot of luck. Manage your expectations while chasing this leader. But what exactly makes this such a strong leader? Basically everything about them. This system has an insane damage output, creates consistent boards, breaks a shield, and nullifies attribute absorption every single turn. One of the few problems that this leader can face are large hits before the barrel awakenings are activated and constant awoken binds that won't let you activate this unit's leader skill. Both issues are relatively easy to address. The early bulk issue is addressed by someone like Daisuke's HP buff and a looping shield like Christmas Hathors. And since both of these units can also clear awoken binds, it's easy to see why these 2 units are very important for this team. If you like these popular subs for the team, finding replacements might be a bit of an issue, though nowadays, Gonho seems to be releasing HP buffers, big shielders, and quick clerics with almost every collab and event. However, your team's damage output might suffer, as those other replacements might have a lower damage multiplier or might not be machine type and not be able to receive Imperialdramon's cap rate. The latter is an issue you could fix with an equip, but if you don't have a deep monster box, your units might not be able to fully triple cap. If you're not lucky enough to get 2 or 3 Imperialdramons, you can even find a replacement for one of them, though at the moment only one is available in NA. Christmas Lisette has a very similar active skill, but this unit was also hard to obtain as she was a BGM in a seasonal that ended a few weeks ago. In the near future, the Toy Dragon Trio will be another option once it gets buffed, but since these units and Christmas Lisette's cap breaks are only for dragon types, you'll be missing damage from Miyako if you don't turn her into a dragon. So only having one Imperialdramon is not the end of the world if you have some of these other options. This BGM's equip is the second one on our server with 2 Part Break Awakenings, and this alone might be worth the bundle purchase if you really care about parts farming, though personally, I think that these 2 Part Break equips are mostly overkill, and most teams don't really need them, but the insane stat boost that you gain if you break a part might be key for certain builds. Getting 2 or 3 Imperialdramons will be a challenge, so aiming for more loops for his equip is not something I would really recommend. Chasing an Imperialdramon team is not for the faint of heart. Before jumping into the REM, be mindful that in addition to at least 2 copies of that BGM, the optimal team also needs the Orb Skin and a mid-priority unit, Daisuke and Miyako. And even outside of the Imperialdramon team, Daisuke and Miyako are extremely useful subs and assists for all of the recent and upcoming Fire and Wood teams. Imperialdramon and Daisuke might be worth the money if you buy bundles, though I would probably wait to pull the trigger until you get at least one Imperialdramon and a Miyako. Some of the exchangeable units might also be worth a look, That mainly goes for BlackWarGreymon, Magnamon, and Shakkoumon, as these can either serve as strong subs for meta teams, have ranking and farming applications, or have unique equips. Outside of these units, I feel like most of the REM2 units are maybe too niche and haven't proven to be useful. Units like Chimeramon, Lydramon, Arukenimon, and Shogun Gekomon either support very specific playstyles or provide fixed boards that might matter in some rankings. Therefore, I recommend keeping an eye on them and be careful of using them as fodder. It's a little bit disappointing that the second REM has this many unimpressive units, and unfortunately, that goes double for the first REM. Units like Taichi, Yamato, and Sora are still very strong, but I would argue that they're not worth the chase or the bundle purchase. The only reason why I would see someone roll the first REM would be to get enough fodder for Diaboromon, whose new Evo works amazingly well in Rosetta teams. I don't think that chasing this unit is the wisest use of resources, but maybe Rosetta is your only viable leader and the 70 Magic Stone prize is something that you can easily stomach. Omnimon can be obtained from the first REM, but thankfully, as opposed to Diaboromon, Omnimon is able to take REM2 units as fodder. So if Omnimon is your goal, you can skip the first REM altogether. Though as opposed to last year, only getting one copy of Omnimon should be fine for most players that have any of the recently released meta teams. Though if you're not making a Digimon team and have no need for the badge, I feel like Omnimon is a unit that some can even skip. If you really want to play the most up-to-date Omnimon team, you will need 3 Omnimons plus 2 of the MP unit. And since again, this team pales in comparison to others in the current meta, I wouldn't recommend spending resources making up this team. But for those of you lucky enough to have an Imperialdramon team, getting 1 Omnimon and 1 of the MP unit is pretty much a requirement if you want the optimal team. The Imperialdramon team is very expensive. Since this rerun isn't as meta-defining as the OG run, I could see some people skipping this collab altogether. Keep in mind all the future events that we know of. Maybe you'd rather save up for those. Hopefully after Digimon, we'll see the My Hero Academia rerun. This one introduces another strong team that rivals Imperialdramon. However, that team is almost as hard to assemble since you will need to get 2 copies of the My Hero Academia BGM unit. But maybe for some, this team is much easier to assemble and thus you might want to go very light in Digimon or skip altogether. Then, we'll see the newer seasonal return. Thankfully, this event is a very easy skip. A Bartender's rerun should follow soon after, and this one also looks like a skip. We know that Path Cafe is set to return, though we don't know if this will be after Bartenders, as we don't have any details yet. Collab-wise, things are very quiet for now, but this might be because JP is gearing up for their anniversary, which will happen mid-February. And unfortunately, we won't have any details before Digimon is over. From what we know so far, I feel like most people will either focus in Digimon or in My Hero Academia. But what are your plans? I got burned on my GP account chasing Imperialdramon, though to be fair, I did only roll about 40 times, and getting 2 Imperialdramons was a far-fetched dream. For my NA account, I'll throw a couple of stones hoping to get lucky, but if I don't see an Imperialdramon early on, I plan to cut my losses and save up my stones for my hero. Best of luck if you're rolling. Thank you guys for watching, and a special thank you goes to Ages Number 1, Braulio, Breastfeeding Obama, Dinko Dante, Eddie Ryan, and Wave for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.